on topic.
Oh, sorry. I think we kind of came up with it as a collective. We had a few different ideas that we wanted to do throughout the semester, and then we kind of branched off into smaller groups to figure out who was going to manage, might like be kind of in charge of the events. But as a group, we kind of threw out a bunch of ideas of what we wanted to see. I think you're on mute, Retha.
So now I have light. The 3 CEOs like, what happened to me? I was in the dark, so now I have light.
You have joined us in the
Yes.
light.
Yes, in the light. I have to join my peoples.
I was like, has the storms impacted you? What are we doing in the dark over there?
I know. When I saw you guys had light, I was like, okay, I don't want to be in the dark too long. So
Probably start around 6:05 for people that are a little late.
Okay. Sounds good. Everything that makes sense. Everyone's so quiet.
I know. I'm like,
yeah, it really is incredibly quiet.
I know it's incredible. Thank you, Alexis. I just,
Well, while we wait for everyone to get here, I would just like to thank all of you all for joining. I see the participants has gone up significantly, but just thank you all for heading out and taking some time out of your day. I know everyone is like zoomed out, like always on Zoom. So like, I really do time to just listen and, just other advocates. I see some Cronkite peers in here too. So just want to shout y'all all out. And of course, our wonderful panelists for joining us today. In light of, the world being terrible, we still made some out of it.
Yes, I know.
Yes, indeed. It's something.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Sure.
Hi, Retha. Haven't seen you forever.
I know. I was just thinking about that. It's been a minute.
Yes.
God. We met, like about 12 years ago?
Yeah.
I was
and then I see like once every 2 to 3 years, like clockwork. It's like, okay, it's about that time.
Yeah.
From Retha sighting.
I know. Oh my God. Yeah. Debbie, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I can't complain. We just had a meeting for Sun Devil Transfer Alliance, which I'm currently the liaison for. So that was a success. It was small, but outreaching. Like Jovan said, I just came from a meeting with Nicole Yeah, no, Natalie actually, for my LinkedIn account, because I taking my IDS 401 class, and I just had a meeting the day before with Sun Devil Athletics because I'm currently interning with them. So it's been an ongoing thing because I'm getting close to graduation, and I took your words of wisdom last time we talked, and I'm like, okay, yeah, what's next? What's next? And I'm always doing that. What's next? Got to keep it going, keep it going. So that's what's up right now. So I'm going to be meeting up with my advisor to finish up the 4 remaining of my classes and start getting ready for graduation and start
May?
networking. Yeah.
In May? Okay.
Yeah, in May. Yeah. So I just now set up my LinkedIn account. It's just about finished. So I actually got to submit my link to my professor. I think his name is Ellisworth, I believe, for IDS 401. So yeah, I'm just out here networking right now and getting ready to get on the ball right now.
All right now. Cool.
So that's what's up. And it's been a blessing. I'm taking this time also to reflect, you know what I'm saying? Because I was in person and now everything kind of like shifted, and you can't get Zoom fatigue, and I try not to, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, good luck. Yeah.
I got it.
Me too. Oh my God.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started because we have quite a few participants here and I don't want to waste y'all's time that are here on time. So let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Awesome. So I'm going to start off. So welcome to Tokenism in the newsroom and media. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to start off with the e-board. Just tell us who you are and what you guys do.
Hi everyone, I'm Kiara. I'm the president of NABJ.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm the vice president.
Hi, my name is Ivory Ward. I am the secretary.
And I'm Javon, and I'm the PR person.
Hi, my name is Alexis, and I am the director of special affairs.
Hi, I'm Kayla, and I'm the treasurer.
Perfect. And let's meet the panelists. We have Madison Jones. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all virtually. My name is Madison Jones. I graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University in May 2019. I feel like I'm representing for the East Coast here in this chat room. So I got my degree in broadcast journalism. While I was in college, I worked for 2 years at NBC 12, the NBC affiliate in Richmond, Virginia, as a video editor. So I got my start pretty early in the news business. My job day to day was to edit video for producers, anchors, cover breaking news, all of that. And then I became a reporter, MMJ, at a small station in Charlottesville, Virginia called NBC 29 after college. And I did that about 8 months. And I was really kind of feeling lost because I had done the broadcasting for so long, but I decided I wanted to try a different career path and kind of get into the PR side of the business. And I just started last week, actually, my new job at GoFundMe as a communications associate, which is awesome because every day my job is to pitch out campaigns to media outlets and reporters. So I'm doing the reverse role of what I was doing as a reporter. So it's really great that I get to stay in the business while doing something different. So if any of you have any questions on PR or communications or broadcast journalism, I'm your go-to person, and I'm just excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Madison. Excellent. Awesome. I believe it's pronounced LaTricia.
LaTricia. Very
LaTricia.
close.
LaTricia Woods will be our next person.
Hello, everyone. And again, thank you for the invitation to be here. I am a graduate of Wichita State University in Wichita, Kansas, so I represent the Midwest. I've been in Arizona since 2005. My career has been a mix of public relations for nonprofits, for-profit media, government, local, and state. And then in 2012, I started my company. And I've been full-time with my company since 2013, and I have clients across the country, and I specialize in public relations, marketing, crisis communications, and multicultural communications. So 2020 has been a big year and a busy year because cross multicultural communications and crisis communications have collided since March. And so it's been a really challenging year, but a really impactful year, helping companies determine what their purpose is going to be and how to communicate that to their audiences.
Awesome, thank you. And then we have Retha Hill.
Yeah, hi. So I'm a professor here at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, and I run the New Media Innovation and Entrepreneurship Lab. But my career was as a traditional print reporter. I graduated from Wayne State University in Detroit. And so the other WSU, which is Wichita State, not so much, right? But so my first job was at the Detroit Free Press, starting out writing, just filling in for other reporters and writing the daily obituary. And then I went to Charlotte, North Carolina, to the Charlotte Observer, where I was a government reporter, worked my way up to cover the mayor of Charlotte, and then got the call from the Washington Post to come up there. So I did that and was a Washington Post reporter for many years, for about 8 years. And then I was a founder of WashingtonPost.com. So I was on the founding team for that and was the Metro editor. Then was vice president at BET, where I started BET Interactive and started the website BET.com, which hopefully you guys have been to a time or two. In addition to working at Cronkite, I own a company called Playable Media, and I'm also launching a new company that's in the virtual reality space. And so that's been all consuming. And so I've worked in mostly big cities, but even within that, like in Charlotte, I was out in one of the bureaus in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So going from Detroit to Rock Hill, South Carolina was mind blowing. And, I was often, the only Black person covering the county council or covering events down there. So it was very interesting.
Awesome, thank you, Retha. Let's get the next slide. Perfect.
All right, so just some quick, I don't even want to say guidelines, but just like things that we request of you guys, just to, or you all, just please try to keep our comments and questions and concerns under 2 minutes until we get to the end, just so all of our panelists have time to speak and we can just get to hear from them like fully through what they're saying. If you do have something that really sparks like a question or something like that, please just use the raise your hand feature and then we'll call on you after they're done talking. If you aren't speaking, can you please put your mic on mute? And that's pretty much it. Just go ahead and send questions in the comment box if you'd like to as well, or if you, again, have a question that you want to ask, or if we touch on something that's like very urgent to you, just raise your hand and we'll go ahead and answer it. And also just remain respectful to our guest speakers and to everyone here. So we're here today to discuss tokenism and the issues surrounding tokenism. And we kind of wanted to get some insight from Black professionals that are in the world now that have different experiences in the newsrooms and media and all platforms that can give some insight to the problems around it and how we can go about fixing it. So with that, what is tokenism? And the dictionary defines this as the practice of making only a perfunctory or symbolic effort to do a particular thing, especially by recruiting a small number of people from underrepresented groups in order to give the appearance of sexual or racial equality within a workforce. Why is this a problem? Racial tokenism, goes against diversity initiatives, and it also puts the weight of race and gender relations on an individual or a select few. So our first question for anyone who is ready to answer or has any ideas, what are some examples of what tokenism looks like in the workplace or in your day-to-day life or maybe with friends? This is for our panelists.
Hand it over to Retha to start for us.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, we've evolved a lot, but I think especially back in the day, you often had like one person, usually the head of diversity or HR, something like that would be the editor or the top African American at a place of business. And you might have one editor who is African American. And I think that was enough for a lot of, so-called progressive companies. When you think about in journalism, 50% of newspapers, even today, have never hired an African American. But the major papers started doing this back in the 1960s. So they needed an African American to help cover the civil rights movement and later the Black Power movement. Even within companies, and LaTricia could probably speak to this more, you often had that one person to show that they have an account executive or that they have, some other middle management person. And it's a problem. And it, still goes on today. In broadcast, a lot of times you see the one Black reporter who's a sports reporter or a general assignment reporter.
I'll go next. For me, from working in 2 different newsrooms, my first thing that always came to mind was if there were multiple Black reporters or producers or behind the scenes people, it was kind of like this microaggression. It was like, oh, you two, if it's a Black male and a Black female, like they try to group us together and say, why don't you two date? Stuff like that, little things like putting us together. Like we don't have to date each other just because we're only 2 Black and Black female, Black male. And another thing was if there was a script that an anchor was reading, and the anchor, let's say it was a name that's a generally name that's associated with an African American person, they might ask you how to pronounce it because they assume that we know how to pronounce it. And that's okay. If you don't know how to pronounce something as an anchor, you should ask, but it was the way in which they were asking you, assuming that you know. So that was the main thing that I really saw. And also just assuming that if a story happened in a neighborhood that was predominantly Black or predominantly a people of color neighborhood, people would, and the newsroom might say, well, don't you know what's happening? Because you might be from there, but in reality, you could be from across town and a neighborhood that's predominantly white. So it's just little things like that that I've personally witnessed and experienced that really represent tokenism for me.
LaTricia, I think you're on mute. Sorry.
I am, because thanks. I would say there's a lot of different ways that you see tokenism every day, including today. I think in media, where you see it the most is when Black anchors are told to look a certain way that is different than what they would normally look like, especially Black women. There's been a lot of stories about Black women, Black female anchors who are asked not to wear their hair natural, even though it's healthier for them, it's better for them. They're like, that's not going to go well with our ratings. That's not what our audience wants to see. So you want to have a Black face, but you want to have a Black face that looks like you want them to look. And so that's one example. I think another one similar to what Madison was saying is, you're in the office, or, I was public information officer for 2 different cities. And so I would always give a question, oh, do you know this Black leader? Yes, I'm a very popular person and I probably know half of the city, but let's not assume that I know every single Black person in the city, And so it's just quantifying things like that, or always having to opine on the Black issue of the day, or working on the Black project. And even though we've evolved, it is something that is still very prevalent in the minds of people who want to be good allies. Because I know my PR colleagues, they really struggle with how to diversify their teams authentically, because they do not want to be accused of tokenism. They do not want to do that to their staff. So they're like, how can we diversify our teams, knowing that it's going to take one at a time, probably, because they may be in a community that they don't feel is super diverse, but they don't want that person to feel like a token. And so what I tell them is, if you don't want them to be tokenized, then don't do it, and give them the power that they need to do their job effectively, and give them the seat at the table and the voice to be heard. Make sure that they are active in all projects that your company or your firm has access to, and not pigeonhole them to urban issues or Black projects, and just really make sure that they're an integral part of your team. And I think that's how we reverse the impact of tokenism and reduce it happening across the board.
Okay, so you guys touched on it a little bit already, but have you ever experienced tokenism? And if so, how did you deal with it? Let's start with Madison.
For me, I would say, like I said, all of my experience has just been working in Virginia. And in Virginia, where I grew up, Richmond, Virginia, it's the capital of the Confederacy. So, of course, my childhood growing up, like we went to like slave plantations for field trips. We went to Civil War battlegrounds, which might be a little strange if you're not from the South. But by saying that, I've always, from a young age, when I would go on these field trips, and they have reenactment scenes, why were the actors acting a different way towards the Black students in the class, like telling us about slavery, when there's a lot that happened in history, and that was something that I didn't realize was wrong until I grew up, if you're following along with me, because my white classmates, their ancestors, they got to learn about them and all these different great things that they did, but ours were just reduced to us being in chains, and I didn't, and that for me showed me that, okay, I'm getting picked out of the group because I was in elementary school always the only Black girl in the classroom. So that started from a young age with me. And then now going into my journalism career, when I started out, it was I was working in the newsroom when Governor Ralph Northam had his blackface scandal. I don't know if you heard about that. The Virginia governor was accused of blackface, and it was kind of like in the newsroom, it was like, okay, so what do you think about that? And it was, and when I was asked that, I kind of felt like, well, I'm the only Black person in the control room right now when I'm being asked this question. How do you guys feel about it being white? Because you guys can have a say too in how you feel. So just little things like that, always being asked to be the representative for your group. And there's a poem that this writer, Peggy McIntosh, wrote about white privilege. And she said something that really resonated with me. And it says, I am never asked to speak for all of the people of my racial group. And that is something that all of us who are Black are always asked to do. So that's just a few examples for me.
Yeah, I would say I've experienced a little bit of that. I mean, obviously, times have changed quite a bit. Sometimes when you are the only African American or one of the few African Americans in a newsroom, and certainly Charlotte had a lot of African Americans, and of course the Washington Post did, but in the bureau, there were three of us, two African Americans, one white person. But for government, I was a curiosity, not just because I was Black, but because I was from Detroit. And so they were very curious about what it was like to be down there, and just how I saw the South. And one of the things that I learned a lot is just how sensitive white people still are in the South over losing that war. So they were always curious as to my take on being in the South, in South Carolina and North Carolina, back in the 80s. And, when we had time to sit and talk about it, kick it around, we would, but other times, I had to do my job. I was there to do a job. I remember one time I went to a company to interview the president of the company. And so the secretary told me to wait, outside in the lobby area. So the guy comes and he looks around and he said, I thought you said there was a reporter from the Charlotte Observer here. And she says, well, there is, she's right there. And so he was really embarrassed. And so I, let him get over it. And then we just got down to business. But the other thing too is I tried not to ever let myself be put into a position of where I'm expected to be the spokesperson for my race, and just always tried to turn that around. And if they ask me, well, what do Black people think about X, Y, and Z? And it's just like, well, that's a great question. Let's try to figure it out. I'll go over to this neighborhood and interview some people. Why don't you go over here? And then, Craig can go over there, and just like, let's do our job and interview people in the same way that you ordinarily would. there was a joke at the Washington Post because whenever something happened with, Marion Barry or something that happened with real African Americans, not official Washington, they always went to this one place. It's called the Florida Avenue Grill. And it's one of those old greasy spoon Black cafes. And so the white people would always go there so they could talk to folk about whatever crazy thing that Marion Barry did or conflicts, over race, as if they didn't have any other reference point. And you see that carried out here in Phoenix with a lot of people going to a few so-called leaders. And it's just laziness. And I've always called it out as just being just lazy reporting. And I always tell my students, when you get to a place, of course, you'll be given what we used to call it a Rolodex, but you'll be given the sheet of all the Black leaders, the Hispanic leaders, the gay leaders. And then people just pass that on as people come into that beat and pass it on to the next person. I always say, go out and find your own sources just by listening and talking to people first. So you're not just only talking to the folks that's been recognized as the leader or a spokesperson for the Black community, because you're narrowing the view of what the Black community might have on a particular subject.
Because I thought about this question a lot, and I think I have been blessed enough that I have not really experienced tokenism when it came to professional situations, because being a public information officer, you're usually an office of one. You report to the city manager, the assistant city manager. So because you have that direct contact, you don't really get in the weeds about too many things, So I think that was a benefit for me. I think where I experienced it would probably be more with coworkers. You get those questions that you're gonna get being a Black person. Women, we know anytime we change up our hair, go to work on Monday, there's a 15-minute discussion on how do you do your hair, how long is it gonna stay, can I get my hair to do that? Then you have to explain to them why you can't. And you just knew that was gonna happen every single time you decided to change your hair. So it was really more probably microaggressions like that, or if there were Black applicants coming in, I may get questions about that, but I was lucky that I never got that from my leadership. I think being first, a lot of times, you really have to mitigate that at the start as much as you can to make sure that you set a foundation of how you want to be treated, and letting them know that certain things are not acceptable. I think being a PIO at Wichita, Kansas is about the size of Mesa. So being the first Black female PIO, I got a lot more questions out in the community because people felt, oh, she looks like me. I can ask her about these issues. She can give me the insight of what City Hall is, which afforded me some great collateral with the leadership, because I had a stronger sense of what the community was wanting to talk about, what issues were really important. So I was able to use that to my advantage. And I think tokenism, it's just, unfortunately, the more we progress, as you see this year, the more we stay the same. And when we think that the battles that were fought in the 50s and 60s and 70s were taken care of, we see that they have not. And I think it's still upon us to tell people how we need to be treated and how we will be treated. And unfortunately, we're still here in 2020.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think you all have been providing some very insightful information for, at least for what I'm hearing, because I've had scenarios like this where I've come across different scenarios and been the token person just in my job. So I think turning it back to an audience, or back to the people asking me, and kind of making it a collective thing is something that I will definitely cherish and appreciate you all sharing with us. With that, how do you all think we can properly diversify and represent people of color in the media, in the newsrooms, and in the workplace. More so focused in the media. I mean, we kind of touched on this, but sorry, go ahead.
I think one thing is, you know, when you feel comfortable, and hopefully you do this pretty much at the outset of your career, is that I think you have to look for ways to defy stereotypes. So at the Washington Post, I would often, if I was doing a story about, you know, welfare reform, I would find a, you know, white woman that was on welfare. I took a few phone calls, but I would find her and get her to be the representative of the face of welfare. I would, you know, do the same thing in terms of, you know, African-American doctors or professionals. Gannett at one point had a percentage. They wanted to see a certain percentage of women and African-Americans and others represented on each section of the newspaper. Now it was like, say, USA Today. It was easier to do with sports, but on Metro, on National, Science, Health, all of that, you had to go out and find them. People used to complain about it. But I know for me, I just always, it was a point of pride to be able to do that. To know places where you could likely find people who would represent. So if I'm doing a story in Washington, if I call Meharry or I called Howard University, hospital, you could find people who would be African-American to speak. It's been amazing to me to see during COVID how diverse the numbers of physicians have become over the last couple of months. I mean, first they had their go-to people, and then all of a sudden you started seeing women, you started seeing African-Americans, you started seeing people with, you know, Muslim last names, you know, Latino, Hispanic. It's been amazing because I think they may have realized to counter some of the narrative of what was going on, the twin dilemmas or pandemics of racism in its ugliest form and COVID, that a lot of the major networks made it a point to diversify the experts that they were talking to and would show. And that's one of the things, because you can't be the representative of all, you know, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. But what you can do when they say, go out and do a man on the street, make sure that the people that you're interviewing are representative of your community. You might take you a little longer. You might have to drive from this part of town to that part of town. You might have to seek it a little bit more, but it's worth it in the end. It's absolutely worth it. And you never know, you know, how that might impact the stories. When the first President Bush was running for re-election, I was, you know, doing local stories in Maryland, and I wanted to talk to working class people who were struggling with the recession at the time that President Bush, Herbert Walker Bush, had not recognized. And I went to a working class white neighborhood and unemployment office in Hyattsville, Maryland. And I knew I would find a mullet wearing, you know, white guy. And yes, I did. And he was on the front page of the Washington Post saying that, you know, the president needs to recognize that people are hurting. It would have been easy for me to go down and just find Leroy and talk to him, but that's not who I wanted. I wanted the message to be from white working class people that his policies were hurting. And you just have to work a little harder.
I try to tackle it from the PR side because my colleagues across the country call me and they're like, we just can't diversify our staff. And I remind them that can't is not the word to try to use. So I give them avenues on where they can start building bridges, because it's not going to happen overnight. And I'm like, you're going to have to go and do some work in the community. You're going to have to make inroads with the NAACP, the National Urban League, the Black Chamber, the Asian Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber. Everybody wants to tout how they go to HBCUs. I'm like, but who do you send? Do you send the whitest person on your team? Or do you send somebody that looks like them? And if you do take someone that looks like them, do you leave the room? Because trust me, they need to ask them some real questions, and they're not going to ask them with you standing right there, because they want to know what your culture is like, what your work environment's like, and they want the real deal, and they're not going to ask with the boss in the room. And so I remind them that it is a long-term process because you're building bridges. You're not trying to just kind of take from here and take from here. And some are really successful with it. I had a colleague in Alaska who was like, there's no Black people here. Like, yes, there are, because there's at least one chapter of the Divine Nine there. So there's at least some Black people there. So let's start there. And I introduced her to some people that I knew. And probably about a year or two later, she started a brand new team that's just for multicultural communications, made up of a very diverse staff. And she said, it took me a while, but I just followed what you said and I kept doing the work. And now we have a good team that's strong, that's ready to do work in this new area. So it is possible, and so I'm trying to attack it from the people that help create the messaging to get to the media, so we can kind of divide and conquer and change what the landscape looks like.
That's awesome. And I have to follow up between two women who are giving you guys gems. So I hope you guys are taking notes. And I want to go off of both of their points and say you have to be an advocate for yourself. And this is something that I've learned this year in 2020. That's one of the big things that I've taken away. And what I mean by that is when you need to document everything so that way you can bring that to the people who are in charge and hold them accountable for things they might have said that were microaggressions or were examples of tokenism or were things that maybe were flat out racist or ignorant, and document those things, bring them to the person in charge and say, hey, I don't like how this was handled. How in the future can we make this different for myself and for everyone who's going to come behind me? So I think that's a really good thing to take away. And as you guys, some of you might be graduating in December or May, or maybe next year, as you're going out and applying for jobs, really make that known from day one in the interview, what you demand. Obviously don't demand, oh, I want this, this, and this, because you don't want to be a diva, but kind of say, so if this was to happen, am I going to have a voice in the newsroom? Because those of us who are in marginalized communities, we have to stand up for ourselves because no one else will. And I just want to shout out my job. When I was applying for jobs and I came across GoFundMe, I'm proud to represent that my company, we are a very diverse group and they take that as a priority. And that was the first time in my life that I've worked for a company where they said, I value you and what you bring to the table. And so that's really great. And I'm in New York City, so but the rest of my coworkers work in California where the headquarters are, and my team is full of women of all different walks of life. So that's a really great thing for me and I have, for the first time in my life, a boss and a manager who's a woman. I've never worked for a woman before. So not every company can be like that, but I think that if you, like I said, advocate for yourself and bring that to the attention, that you can make a difference just by looking out for yourself.
And if I could follow up on what Madison just said, because several of you are about to graduate and hit the corporate world, the real world, and knowing your worth is going to be extremely fundamental in what you're about to do as you negotiate your salary for your first job. There's a great story, because remember when Hamilton hit Disney and everybody was doing the countdown to the major night, there was almost a snag in that because they had assumed that every single person in the original cast was on board. Leslie Odom Jr. had not signed his contract yet because they couldn't agree on the numbers, because his numbers were coming in lower. And he said, I need to be paid as much as the actor who played Danny Zuko in Grease Live. And don't call me back until you're ready to do that. And so they met him on his term, but he was not gonna go forward for a penny less than what he felt he was worth. And if you can pay this Caucasian man who was in Grease Live this amount, then that's what you're gonna pay me. And I think we get really, really excited when we go on that first interview and they call you and like, we're about to offer you a job. And you're like, yes. You need to do research. You need to see what other people in that industry is being paid. There's resources out there to help you do that. I will honestly tell you, my first PIO job, I was so excited. It was 10,000 more than I was making. I thought it was the bomb.com. I said yes. A year later, they said, we would have paid you more, but you never asked. So negotiate, know your worth, negotiate for exactly what you're worth, know what you're willing to bend on. If it's less salary, is it more benefits? Is it more flexibility? Is it work? Just know what your points are before you negotiate and settle. Because once you value yourself, if you devalue yourself, it's hard to revalue yourself in their eyes.
Yeah, and I think for students just starting out, young people just starting out, that there's a way that if they're stuck on a number, you know, it's COVID, we can't pay people that much. You know, there's a way that you can say, okay, well, let's do this. Let's come back in 6 months. If I do these things in 6 months, I want to revisit that. And if they're not willing to, you know, if the economy is not falling apart, if they're not willing to do that, then walk, you know, go find another job and just get out of there because they fell back on their word. And yeah, when it's a booming economy, like, you know, a couple of years ago, then definitely I think you can push to get that number up as high as you can. And as LaTricia said, flexibility, maybe you want to go back to school, get a master's or something else, or work something that helps with your schedule. And when I was at the Post at one point, I was working on a master's degree at Georgetown. So I worked Tuesdays through Saturdays. Great thing about Saturdays, you're always in the Sunday paper. And then I had the weekend and Monday to go to class down at Georgetown. So worked out for me.
Awesome. So those are all the questions we had. Is there any questions from the audience that they'd like to ask the panelists?
I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I am from Georgia, and I've been in predominantly white spaces since middle school. So I know what it's like to deal with the microaggressions and the tokenism. And at this point, like I've like jaded to it, and it's kind of like it doesn't even, like I don't even realize when it's happening anymore because it's just such a thing, which sucks to say, but it's also true. And so when I got to the job that I'm working at now, the first video that I shot for them, I had a lot of footage of mainly people of color, but the guy editing the video was Caucasian, and he really only took like the 2 Caucasian interviews I had out of the litany of people of color that I had spoken to. And so then I was like, oh, okay. In my head, I was like, if I want this done, I'm gonna have to do it correct. Like if I want it done correctly, I'm going to have to do it. So how do you like balance not wanting to be the token, but also making sure that like your people's stories and your community stories are told and you know, written with care. And so now I don't mean to head up a bunch of like urban things, but I also, you know, like you mean to and you don't all at the same time. So like, what is that balance? That's something I'm like trying to navigate through right now.
I feel like, because I've kind of been in your shoes before, when I was in MMJ, obviously I shot my own stuff. And sometimes I did work with a photographer, and I would always, you know, if I got 2 interviews and they both were 2 Black people, then that's all you're getting in the newscast. But if I have one Black person, one white person I interviewed, or whoever, maybe try in the package, have both voices in a VOSOT, do one or the other. And I would say to that person, you can confront them in a nice way and just say, hey, let's show diversity if that is so important, and like ask him, why did you do that? See what his point was. Maybe he did it on a mistake, maybe it was conscious because that's all he knows, so that's what he wanted to represent. Because I think that the conversation, I don't think you should let it slide, and you should recognize that it happened. And like I said, document everything either mentally or write it down, because if this keeps happening, you can bring it to your authority and say, hey, this is a trend, let's work on it, and let's try not to keep letting this happen. And also for you too, something to think about is as you're in this role, think about maybe you being in charge, so you have all the decisions to make, and that goes for everybody. You could start at entry level, but also have in your mind how you're going to be the leader, so that one day when someone might be asking, you might be in our shoes and somebody's acting this, you'll be the leader and you'll be able to be in charge, so things like this maybe won't happen.
Yeah, that was sort of my solution to it, because the place I work now, luckily I have a lot of freedom with what I can and can't, with what I can do. I on as a writer, a storyteller, but I told them that I'm done a broadcast background and I do video as well. And so once I saw that happened, I just picked up the editing for the videos that I shot, and I was doing like Welcome Black poetry slam videos and things like that. So that's kind of how I confronted the issue, but definitely I will take the advice of like further than mentally noting it, but like writing it down and things like that.
Awesome.
Any other questions? Yeah. I mean, one thing too is, you know, in certain instances, you can talk to their bottom line. I mean, if you want to increase viewership, then let's make sure that we're including, you know, this community and that community. If you want to, you know, really show that you're a diverse and welcoming company, then you have to, you know, you have to try harder and be a solutions-oriented person. I know in digital, you always hear people, well, we can't find African-American content producers, or not multimedia producers so much anymore, but people who really understand the internet and coding and all of that. And you just really have to grow your own. And I always tell them that back in 1999, when I was hiring for BET.com, the number of African Americans who are doing internet related content creation, you could pretty much count them on one hand. I had to create the people. I found smart people. I hired smart young people straight out of Hampton and Howard and others that I knew, and I trained them. You know, as we were building the site, I had about 5 months to get these young people and these people in shape in terms of how to do internet, how to create content live, how to learn how to you know, HTML, all of that. And we had drills. We would do all kinds of things. And, you know, all of a sudden I would just like have a pretend it's deadline and you had to get your stuff done and in by a certain time. And it was just like, you know, any other type of emergency drill. And those people, they really rose to the occasion. And so many of those early hires are in just amazing positions all across the country now. And in leadership positions, and our directors and vice presidents are the head of companies. And that's what you do. You don't give up and say, oh, I can't find. I had to, because I couldn't hire a bunch of my former colleagues from WashingtonPost.com to come over to BET.com. I had to hire authentic people, and I just trained them. In 4 months, they were ready to go. And if I can do that as one person, I know you know, the NBC affiliate in this place and that place can do the same. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I'm sure you heard your parents or your grandparents say that, and it's so true. If you want something, you just have to make it so.
Thank you so much.
I had a question. Hi, I'm Jasmine. So my question for you is when, well, all of you ladies actually, when going into these new spaces, how are you able to take up space in terms of, you know, your own creative writing or your own, like, whatever you're working on in general, and whatever you're hired to do? How are you taking up space, and how is that affecting your job in terms of working with people that may do things differently, in terms of, you know, whoever may be in charge of you, your boss, people you have to work with? What challenges have you like faced, and how do you handle those accordingly without coming off overly aggressive and, you know, just how do you go about really working with people that may not see where you're coming from, because you are basically bringing in a new perspective?
Jasmine, that's a very, very good question. I have two aggressive stories, because, you know, we all love that that terminology. One of the reasons that I left government to start my own business, one, because after 15 years you get bored doing the same thing, was I had an incident where I was working late one night and there were 2 or 3 people in the entire building, me, a Caucasian female, and some guy off somewhere else. And she had had a really bad day. I don't know what happened to her, but she had a really, really bad day. And I was in my office and I'm typing away, and she comes and stands in my door and has a breakdown. She just loses it. She cusses me out. She's like railing, and I'm like, she's in my doorway, so I can't leave. I'm not quite sure what to do right now, so we're gonna let her have this moment and we'll move on. And then she left. It was like that quick. Called my boss, said, hey, this kind of just happened. What would you like me to do? And without clockwork, she said, what did you do to her? Did you miss the part where I was sitting in my office, minding my own business, working on a deadline? What do you mean, what did I do to her? Well, you must have done something to provoke her. Telepathically? Was it in the air? What is this? And the next day they do the whole kumbaya meeting. Well, what do you have to say to her? Are you going to apologize for her? And I was like, again, I'm kind of lost on what I'm apologizing for, because again, I was minding my own business. What are we doing? And at that point, I realized in her eyes, I had the power to do a lot of things to a lot of people, but what I was supposed to be doing. And I just was like, if I'm always the default bad person, how do I excel? And so that bothered me. And so that just stuck with me. Now, fast forward to my second example. Now that I work for myself, I can be aggressive with myself, whatever I want. But I was on a call with a client, probably a couple of months ago, and she was going through a speech that she was going to give, and we were prepping her, and she just went on this tangent, and she was a Caucasian woman. And I said very calmly, okay, so I'm about to talk to you and I need you to hear me. And everybody got real quiet because I'm the only Black female I'm the only Black person on the call. And they're like, okay, LaTricia's about to go to the left and we don't know what's about to happen with the client. And I said, this is what you just said. This is how I heard it. And this is why it's a problem. And if this situation takes you there, we need to remove you from the situation because it's not going to work. And people were really nervous. I don't think people breathed for 5 minutes. And at the end, she was like, I need to thank you for doing that, because you took the time to tell me what I was doing wrong. You told me why it was wrong, and you did it respectfully. You did it purposefully. And I thank you for that, because nobody else would have did it. And so you have to find a way to make that space. So she knows now, if I need somebody to be straight with me, I'm going to LaTricia first, because LaTricia will tell me what I need to hear. And I was prepping her for another speech today, and she said, I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to talk to him. I wanted you to prep me because you're going to tell me what's wrong. You're going to tell me what I need to change in my speech, and you're going to get me ready. So I now have that space with her, but you got to go in and you kind of not have to take it, but you have to you have to make yourself big enough to own it. No one can be in a space that you already are in. So when people say stay in your lane, if your car moved out, so that space in that lane was there, you can't say nothing. Make sure your car is in your lane and nobody else can be there. But own your space, know your talent, know your worth, and that's what you show up with. Long story for a short answer.
Oh, it's a good one. Good story. Whew.
Thank you, LaTricia. Does anyone else have any questions? That was very good. Very insightful. Thank you. Ivory, if you can, we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. We're just going to share some events that we have coming up. So this Sunday is going to be our Black Breakdown, which we've been having every Sunday, where we just we set a different podcast or some type of content that we all watch during the week. And then on Sundays, we come together and talk about it, share our opinions, or just whatever we thought about the show. So this Sunday, we'll be discussing Black is King, and it's going to be on Instagram Live. So check that out. Definitely, you'll see some promo, and there's links to view Black is King, and the Black Breakdown is going to be on our bio, on all our social media. And our next general body meeting is going to be, it says 6/12, but it's November 6th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's November 6th at 7 p.m.
Yeah, so Ivory, if you could edit that real quick, please. So people have the right date. That would be amazing. But it will be November 6th. I'll type that in the chat at 7 p.m. And there will be some promotion going out about that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I appreciate all of you coming out, Maddie, LaTricia, and Retha, and speaking and sharing your experiences that you've had. It was very insightful for me, and I know a lot of other people learned a lot in this panel discussion. So I just want to thank you all, and I want to thank all of you attending again. And yeah, before we all go, I would like if we can all take a picture. So if you're willing and able, would you mind going on camera? And then I'll count down and we can smile and say cheese. Ivory, if you could take your screen off, that'd be amazing. Okay, perfect.
Also, we can stop recording.